Let me introduce you to inspiring entrepreneurs. Hi there, my name is Ben Gothard. My mission is to interview incredible entrepreneurs who are changing the world and present their stories to you, unscripted and unedited. From billionaires to Forbes 30 Under 30 recipients to New York Times best-selling authors and much, much more. These people are living proof that nothing is impossible. Join me on this journey to learn from their experiences and become the person you're meant to be. Welcome to the Project Egg Show, every morning at 8 a.m. Central. Nine, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another exciting episode of the Project Egg Show. Today, we have the honor of speaking with Todd Palmer, the collaborative business advisor and CEO of Extraordinary Advisors. Simply put, EA helps business leaders get shit done. I love that. I think that's awesome. As the CEO of a 6-time Inc. 5000 company, Todd knows that business success begins and ends with people. Now, I could go on and on about Todd's very impressive accolades and awesome things that he's done, but I couldn't possibly cover it in this brief introduction. So instead, let's just jump right into it. Todd, how you doing today?
I am doing very well, my friend. How are you?
I am fantastic, and I'm so glad that you could join us on the show. Thank you for taking time out to speak with me.
Absolutely happy to be here. Thank you for having me on the show.
Sweet. So let's jump right in. What is your story?
Well, so kind of soup to nuts. I grew up the product of a single household. My father passed away when I was when I was only 5 years old. My mother raised me, and that provided a lot of great opportunities and a little bit of challenges along the way through life. As I was going through school, I fully recognized that growing up on a farm in Michigan with 42 kids in my graduating class was not for me, and I wanted to make a bigger impact in the world, maybe like some of your listeners today. I was trying to figure out where my path was going to go. Upon graduating college, I taught at a university for a couple of years. Found out that while I really enjoyed that work, the path and the politics and some of the hoops that needed to be jumped through were more than my impatient style could handle. Around the same time, I became a single dad. I got custody of my son when he was only 2 years old. And it dawned on me that what I really wanted to do was to do my very best to create a life by design. And I felt the best way for me to do that was to become an entrepreneur. So I started my first company in 1997 at the ripe old age of 27 years old. It kind of just went from there. It was one of those bad business decisions. The business plan required $140,000 in capital investment. I went to one of the 3 F's, friends, family, and fools, and got $15,000 and bet that I could make this thing work within 90 to 120 days. By day 72, we were cash flowing positively and we're making a profit. So it was a incredibly stressful decision, incredible journey. Didn't realize in 1997, much like here in 2019, the country was at a great spot for people who did the employment services. The company I started was a staffing business, temporary and permanent placement. Did a lot of work in the Metro Detroit area for manufacturing jobs. From there, by 2006, thought I had a lot of stuff figured out. I kind of exited a little bit of the business, was doing some other things. And embarrassed to say that by September of 2006, I was $600,000 in debt. I was about 60 days or 2 months away from running out of all of my money. And I had a toxic and dysfunctional culture within my organization. And as I often tell my clients now with Extraordinary Advisors, the bottleneck at the top of the company, and I was the bottleneck in my own business. So I walked in mid-September, fired the entire company, started over, and went on to make the Inc. 5000 a record 6 times in the next 7 years. Changed the way we hired. We started to hire for DNA, not for resume. And now I'm out of that business. It runs without me. And I'm working with a lot of CEOs and entrepreneurs and executives to help them grow their companies through our company, Extraordinary Advisors, where we really help leaders figure out what their core values are. And once we figure out what their core values are as a person, we mirror those and measure those up against the mission statement of their companies. 99 out of 100 times we found there's a big gap between the two, and we help them close that gap. And then we work on people, cash, strategy, and execution, and take companies who maybe aren't making money to greater success financially. But more importantly, we create a life by design for those leaders, so the entrepreneurs are enjoying their work on a much more.
Wow.
It's an awful lot in just 3 minutes.
That is an incredible story. I want to talk about, I want to talk about all of it, but I want to start off by talking about your childhood.
Sure.
And I don't exactly know the right way to ask the question, because I, of course, want to be very respectful. But what was it like for you to grow up and to lose somebody so close to you at
Sure.
such a young age?
I think it's a great question. I think a lot of that experience as a 5-year-old little kid tied into my desire to be an entrepreneur. And I think it comes down old, and you lose a parent specifically. For me, it was my dad. This is 1974, so it was a very different time and a very different world than 2019. At the time, my mom was a stay-at-home mom. My brother was a senior in high school. My sister was recently graduated from high school. So my whole core family was there on a pretty much day-to-day basis. The loss of the patriarch of our household caused a lot of shifts and changes. My sister was already planning on getting married. She ended up getting married, moving to Arizona. My brother got an athletic scholarship we're in Michigan. He went to an athletic scholarship in Kentucky, and my mom had to go back to work. So within about a 90-day period, all of my key caregivers were gone. The sense of abandonment I felt as a child, through no one's fault, was significant. And what that taught me, and what played out as a benefit, one my life, in a different part of life, was reliance. A lot of entrepreneurs that I've spoken with have had a lot of these big life events come up for them. And most entrepreneurs are rugged individualists. And what that does is, at some stages, your ability to have self-reliance is powerful. Then there's a point, at least for me, I found, and a lot of the entrepreneurs I know, you reach this point where that you become an entrepreneur alone, which makes you an entrepreneur at risk. We don't typically do a very good job of asking for help. We think we can dig out of any hole. We're the kids in school, or the entrepreneurs who think, you know what? I think jumping out of this plane is a really good idea. No, I'm not wearing a parachute, but I think I'm smart enough or clever enough, or I have enough persistence to jump, and somehow, some way, I'll land on my feet 10,000 feet up in the air. And it doesn't always work out that way, with businesses having a 90% failure rate. So I think that self-reliance really, though, spun off of the fact of losing a parent at such a young age. Part, the powerful part for me was then it gave me that self-reliance to start companies.
How do you, and how did you find, because it seems like that was a tremendous challenge that you turned into a learning opportunity, and that you really grew from that. But that is a tremendous impact on anybody's life. I think about in my own life, like I am so grateful for the people in my life. And like, how did you do that? How did you stay positive? How did you stay forward thinking?
Well, it's interesting because I didn't always stay positive. I think there's a lot of people when you made all those, those 6 times universities and schools would bring me, hey, come in and talk to our students about success. And I'd always have to tell them those tough parts that we introduced this show with today, so that kids, entrepreneurs. I mean, some of my entrepreneurial kids I have a couple CEOs that are in their 50s that I work with, and we all come from somewhere. Most of us have humble beginnings. We're not people who typically have a lot given to us. But I don't want to give you or your audience any false impression that it was just a great Hollywood novel where I was able to be positive every day and life was all just abundance and not scarcity. No, there were many, many times where I think I felt less than some of my peers in school. I think there were times where I was very self-reliant, but also self-critical because I had to rely so much on myself. I was very fortunate. My mother was one of those type of people who was very self-made in her own right. My older guy, someone who when people ask me who do I admire the most, it's my older brother, Greg. He's just a massive, massive success in the real world, but he's just a great guy on top of all that. So I learned a lot by the people around me too. So when I would get down in how I would get through that, was through, I was a big athletic guy. As you can see by the stuff behind me, I'm a big baseball guy. And baseball, if you really critically think about it, is the only sport where if you fail 7 out of 10 times, you're considered a success as a baseball player. It's the only sport where the offense can only participate once the defense gives them the ball. So I enjoyed all those things. And for me, it was just a lot of little things along the way, a lot of luck along the way too. We can't pretend that luck isn't a factor in being successful. I was very, very fortunate. But really, I think if I had to go back, it certainly started first and foremost with my mother. She was always one of those people who said, it's not if you go to college, but when you go to college. So that seed was planted very early. My brother would then echo that. My sister would then echo that. And so that it was almost like success was at least the opportunity, the staging of an academic education, the ability to go forward in the world was always ingrained. And it's something that I remember when I was raising my son, I reflected fondly on those days and tried to pass that on to him. But by no means was every day nothing but roses and unicorns, because that's not true.
Wow. Why did you look up so much to your brother Greg, and what specifically did you look up to him for?
Well, I think there's a couple of factors. I think the first factor is the difference in our age. When I was 5, he was 17. There was that part. So I think by his own thoughtfulness and for me as his younger brother, he took on that father figure role, which was awesome. Secondarily, he was a really good athlete. So I always admired that. He worked really, really, really hard. He was a golfer. He was a Division I golfer. And in talking with him, now that we've gotten older, it's funny. I said, recently I was saying, so when you were taking lessons and he goes like, I never took a golf lesson, because I read a book and I just did exactly what the book told me to do over and over and over and over and over again. So his ability to laser focus and his ability to just have such great discipline was powerful. I admired that. And I always felt that there was a sense of legacy. My mom was someone who created massive legacy thoughts within us. He carried that forward. He was the first one in our family to graduate from a four-year university. I wanted to be like my brother. He was out in the business world making a success for himself. I thought that was a good idea. So either by patient, I learned a great deal from him, and he would always tell me the things he admired about me as a young person. That reinforcement was so huge for a kid who was just trying to figure out his way in the world. So it's a lot of different things that, again, goes back to luck. What if I didn't have him? How would I have turned out? So I'm very, 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 very grateful for the influence that my older brothers played in not only my career, but more importantly, my life as a human being, my life as a father, my life as a man.
Let's talk about baseball for a second, because you have an incredible number of of baseballs back there.
Yeah.
And where did the love really come from? I mean, I know you talked about it a little bit, but
yeah, I'll give you this, and I think you're I've done quite a few podcasts and interviews in the last 20 plus years. No one's ever asked me that question, so I love your unique approach to that. So for me, one, I just loved playing the game as a kid. I was always big into watching the game, participating in the game. And I always collected baseball cards. I think I got my first pack of cards in 1979. I remember, I think it was like one of those visceral moments. Like I remember getting the cards and opening it up and going through them. And it was such a cool experience for me. And I never really gave it up. And I remember my mom always saying that she was always very supportive of the hobby, supportive of the sport, supportive of the interest. She took me to spring training. When I was growing up as a kid, I wanted to be a writer. Way before I wrote my first book, I wanted to be a newspaper reporter. I was fortunate because I would just show up and I get to interview athletes, and it was really cool. And this is all back in the days when everything was newspaper, no internet, no radio, nothing like that, no podcasts. And so I just really enjoyed that. And I think so the sport for me, obviously it's not the world's fastest paced game. But for me, I love the strategy behind it. I love the little intricacies of it. I still play. I played a game out Monday this week. I'll go to Florida to play. I'll go to Arizona to play. I love the sport. I translate the sport often to business because of the failure aspect of it and the resiliency. And while you can be part of a team, you still have your individual performance. Same within business, that you can do your very best in baseball. They call it squaring up the ball. You hit it the best you can and you hit it right at somebody. As the hitter, you recognize that there's nothing different that you could have done other than hitting it somewhere else. Well, you got to hit the ball where it's pitched by your opponent. So if he beats you, he beats you. And there are times when you hit the ball at the end of the bat and you get a hit in the box score, but you didn't hit it the best you could. Sometimes that's the way business works. We're unlike football where you play once a week. Baseball, you pretty close to 5-6 times a week, a new opportunity and a chance to grow. Baseball is one of those games that you can never master it. The best players, from Ted Williams to Mike Trout, have not mastered the game. They're better at it than I've ever been, but they haven't mastered it. So I love the lifelong learning aspect. So there's so many different both participatory pieces, but the learning opportunities and the I literally could go on for hours.
That's awesome. So when you were first in 79, right? So you would have been about 9 years old, maybe 10.
I was 11.
11. So you open this pack of cards and you're like, this is the greatest day ever.
Yeah.
Like, what about that was so impactful to you that you would remember it all these years later?
That's a really interesting question. I think for me there was a tactile feel. You're holding something. You're holding someone's career. You're holding someone's sense of accomplishments or real accomplishments, and the action pictures and the smell of the gum. It was just a really cool thing. And it's one of those situations nowadays, the collectibles market, the memorabilia market is so corporate. It is so systematized. There's a lot of fraudulent activity in the autograph market and all these other kind of things. For me, it was just it's nostalgia. It takes me back. It's those type of experiences. And as a kid, opening it up and seeing these cool pictures, knowing I just started playing and I was pretty good at the sport at one point. And so there's just lots of little tentacles that stick with me. And the other thing of it is, in reality, is we didn't have video games. We didn't have, we had 3 channels to watch TV on. I've probably just lost 9% of your audience, like I'm talking to a dinosaur here. But we didn't have all those things. So you had to read the newspaper, you had to listen to the radio, you could watch games occasionally. So it was just another way, growing up in a small town, to connect with a bigger world. And to me, there was nothing bigger than being a baseball player.
Wow. Let's talk about writing. You mentioned how you wanted to be a writer and you wanted to work with the newspaper. Like, where did that come from? What was the driving force behind that?
I was really fortunate growing up in a small town and growing up with teachers who really cared about the basics of life. And the teachers that I had were always preparing us to go on to a university environment. Because a lot of the kids I grew up with lived, were born in that town and they died in that town. They grew up on farms. They worked on those farms. And we were kind of that one of those first generations where we're actually to go off and do other things. So for me, I love to read. I love the storytelling aspect of things. And now so much of what I do is tell stories and get people to tell me their stories and then help them reframe those stories. So this story arc was always really interesting to me. And I loved the art of the novel, the art of a well-made movie as a kid. And I thought, well, someone had to create that. How did they do that? And I had a teacher who taught me the story arc, and we did a lot of work around Shakespeare and all those different things. And I found that I could just really, I like the structure and the linear part of writing, but I also like the creativity. So it kind of fed both sides of my brain, so to speak. And I found that I really not only love the journalistic aspect of things and telling the story of other people, but also the investigative journalists, the 60 Minutes type of reporters back in the day who would go in and ferret out the unfairness of the world. And then there was a creative side of things. And so for me, it was just an opportunity. And the greatest thing, going back to being self-run, is I could do it by myself. I didn't need other kids to do it. I could play writer. I could do writer by myself. And I had a couple of friends of mine back in the day who wanted to be writers. And we would just talk about ideas and what we wanted to do. And I just kept saying, I just want to be a sports writer. I just want to be a sports writer. They tell the greatest stories about the greatest people in the world. Well, there's this construct of don't meet your heroes. Well, I've met some of my heroes, and some ball players are just like you and I. They're real down to earth, great guys. And I met some other guys who you think on the surface are just so cool, but in front of the camera, you meet them behind the camera, and they're just unfortunately disappointing. And, I've been fortunate to meet those guys and meet some celebrities, and they're like from every other aspect of the world. But when you're a kid growing up in the middle of nowhere, Michigan, and your only conduit to a bigger, brighter world is TV, movie, you think that's what I want to go do. So for me, it was the written word was something so much easier to do than math or science.
You mentioned the story and the story arc. What actually is that? Like, what does that mean to you? Like, what is the story arc? How do you build it? How do you explain it?
Well, Joseph Campbell has the 17 features of a story out there for anybody who's really curious about the whole granular piece. But for me, there were basically there was the narrative of like a Shakespeare who would build up. You'd have the tipping point moment and then closure. Or you'd have the journalistic place, who, what, where, when, why, and how. And 100 years later, I still remember that. And all the different elements of that. So what it did for me is I worked really well with the framework of both the creative narrative as well as the journalistic narrative. And when I write a book, I complained about writing my book for about 3 years, and a buddy of mine finally said, "Listen, I'm tired of hearing about you writing this book." And I said, well, yeah, but my book is designed, the job search process is designed for the first job out of school, high school, or college. I'm like, these kids don't know if they're not prepared, and the schools are letting them down. He's like, seriously, you've got the book right in your head. Just write the darn thing. So I wrote it in like 45 days. It was crazy because I had that structure and I had that flow through, and I edited it and sent it to an editor and got it all done. But for me, it helped me especially for an entrepreneur who chases the bright and shiny things. For the structure of writing helped me catalog my thoughts and synthesize the message I wanted to deliver. So now when I do a speech, it's very much the same way. When I'm on stage, and last year I spoke in Toronto, I spoke in Mexico, I spoke at the University of South Africa, all those areas, I could have universal appeal because my structure was constant with high. So for me, the narrative frees up the creativity. Whereas a lot of people I just want to be creative, but they're all over the place. The structure gives me that sense of calm, sense of purpose, and that sense of freedom to express.
I love that because it's like, it almost seems at first like there are two competing forces, like structure, but creativity. But when you have the structure, that's like your sandbox to then get creative.
And I call it the sandbox. Exactly. It's just like you could do, I kind of went for my audience. I'll draw it out. It's a box. As long as I have the structure of the box, whatever I do inside of the box is up to me. That's the creativity. I said that to entrepreneurs, here are the four pillars of business, the north, the south, the east, and the west. You got cash, strategy, people, execution. But what you do inside of that box, what you do for the creative, how you emote that and how you express who you are, that's the magic. And that's what people will pay you for. Now, once you figure that out and you put processes and systems below the surface of that, that's what someone's going to buy if you ever want to sell your business. And so many entrepreneurs get so wrapped up in the wrong things as compared to focusing on how do I get my message. There's plenty of money. People say, well, I can't start a business because I don't have money. There's plenty of money out there. What we need are better ideas. And what we need is better ideas articulated correctly, so an investor, whether it's an angel, a VC, a bank, can say, yes, I not only invest in your idea, but more importantly, I invest in your critical thinking skills. If people took more of that narrative approach to lay out their thought processes in a fashion where their audience is going to be able to receive them, they're going to get a whole lot further. So many people are so concerned with pride of authorship. This is my idea, and this is the only way it can be done. There's nothing worse than someone who wants to get into the restaurant business in Italy and they want to open an Italian restaurant. The chances of them being successful are probably pretty small versus, okay, I want to open a restaurant. Great. What does the marketplace need? They need this, this, and this. They're missing this, and that's what. So let's talk to people. It's about. I'll have to talk with my entrepreneurs about this. They expect it to go a certain way. What if we had the intention of just creating a great dining experience as compared to expecting to open a great Italian restaurant? Well, and again, there's so many stories in the world that if the intention is there versus the expectation, success can occur. So I got a little bit down a rabbit hole there. I apologize. But I think there's a lot of merit in the structure of writing and in the structure of critically thinking through. And for me, I learned it through the art of writing.
Well, rabbit holes are very encouraged on the show. So I just want to throw that out there. And I totally agree with you that like going through your own structure and creating your own structure, rather, like that gives you the freedom to then create from it. It gives you the foundation with which to then expand from.
I couldn't agree with you more. What the structure does is it frees up the creativity. So if you think of how the human brain works, we've got a creative higher cerebral cortex, but we also have our mammalian brain, our fight or flight brain. And if that's highly active because it feels threatened, it can't create. The structure calms that part of your brain, allowing the entrepreneur, the CEO, the executive, the parent to create. But if we're always in fight or flight, we'll never access it. The science proves it out day after day. Someone said to me the other day, why should I hire you as a coach? So it's really easy. Here's my resume. Here's everything I can do for you. But I still use a coach. I use a leading neuroscientist on the West Coast to help me explain to people better how our brains work so we can achieve more, create the life by design. And he always starts with, you can't be in fight or flight and creativity simultaneously. You've got to address the fears to get to the higher point, and here's how we do it. So it's science behind it, but the structure, it creates a sense of calm. The sense of calm then allows the creativity to foster. And the crazy part about it is, my young friend, so much of it is done on a subconscious level. It blows my mind. Just plant that seed, let it sit there. You're not going to fix it right now. Give it a day or two, let it percolate. You'd be surprised how you look at the world differently after a good night's sleep.
And I also think when it comes to like managing people and building your team and leading your team, that if the team does not have the structure to fall back on, to where they know like, okay, these are my responsibilities, these are the systems that are in place, this is how we can operate the machine, then that it's just chaos. And there's already plenty of chaos out in the world, right?
And there's plenty of chaos between our ears.
Exactly. Yeah, there's chaos everywhere. So the structure gives you that foundation. And I'm talking specifically now with the team. It gives the team the foundation to where they can now go and deal with the chaos.
Well, it not only gives them the foundation to deal with the chaos, it also gives them the foundation to deal with one another, to creatively problem solve. And I mentioned I let my entire team go back in 2006. When we switched to DNA over resume, we had to create a structure so that when I recruited people to come to join us who didn't have a recruiting background, they had rules to play by. They had a game plan of what success looked like. They had steps by which to do it. Then they could create whatever they wanted. And it's amazing how many people find it to be uncomfortable. They just want to be told what to do, when to do, and how to do it. Well, for us, because I'm happy to give you those marching orders in that play, but I need your creativity. And so much of the time was spent working with people saying, yeah, I understand that you can't be, so you and I are having a natural conversation. Our conversation is not scripted. There's nothing worse than, as a recruiter, calling someone as a job candidate and scripting out every single thing you're gonna say in every single sentence.
Boresville.
Well, it's Boresville. It's inauthentic and it's completely unsuccessful. But people want to do that because they don't want to fail. So no, we have to have a fail-forward thought process. And the only way we're going to fail is to try this, see what works, see what doesn't. When we were reinventing the company, we tried several different ways to get things going and get better cash in the door and move things. They don't typically work the first time out. It's not the movies. And so getting people to understand that was a huge thing. But once you get that framework, it flourishes. That's where so much magic happened. We've changed so many different lives. We've placed over 6,000 people. In our minds, we've changed 6,000 lives and 6,000 families. And if we were doing it like the guy calling from overseas in the call center, it's not going to work real well.
You know, I think there is so much wisdom there, especially when you're talking about business is not like the movies, or life is not like the movies. You're usually not going to get it right the first time. And that is so okay. It is unbelievable to me why people are still so afraid to fail. Like you're going to fail. You have to fail. You have to fail. And the failure, it shows you what you're doing wrong or what you need to be doing better so that you can fix it and then you can move forward. But you're always going to fail. It's just a necessity. You fail constantly.
Well, you do. And people get so wrapped up. And I think a lot of it does come from how our parents treat us, how school treats us academically. And I can't imagine if we talked to an infant who's learning how to walk the same way we talk to ourselves when we get a bad grade. Well, little Jimmy's starting to walk, boom, he falls down. Oh, I suck. I can't walk anymore. No, he gets back up and he tries and he tries and he tries. And then he starts to walk and he stumbles and he falls down. But eventually he's running across the living room floor. That's as human animals, that's how we learn. And somewhere along the way that gets kind of deprogrammed out of us. We create perfectionistic thought processes, whether it's, again, parenting or teachers or our own self-critical inner voices. And you'd be surprised that once you free yourself up and you see failure not as win-lose, but as flexible experience, and when you see failure as another step in the learning process, and that learning process and another step in your path to success, so much changes. And the journey is so much more enjoyable versus, I failed, I this. We can be our own worst inner critic. Now, the failures and the challenges in business, if we fail and we keep trying the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, that's insanity. But if we try something and it doesn't work, but I tried these 5 things, 2 of those things just didn't work. But those other 3 things, I think there's merit. Okay, we're going to take those 3 things and iterate and iterate and iterate and iterate. And that's why we get updates on our computers and updates on our phone, because the programmers missed something. Something doesn't work right. So we're going to send you version 3, version 4, or version 5. If you really think about it, aren't those really failures? But they're updates. Great. Well, let's update the way we think, because so much more can happen. I gave this speech to a mixed group in Toronto. Comes up to me, drew a diagram of what now failure looked like to him. He goes, Mr. Todd, you said failure 12 times. He had 12 little boxes. He goes, and that equals success. He goes, so basically, I'm never going to fail because I can't imagine doing something 12 times and it not working, or me trying something different. His parents were so excited that they dragged him to my speech and he had a great time. And now his name is Alec. Alec now has a slide in my slide deck because I was so blown away by his ability to absorb this as a 9-year-old. And if one 9-year-old is able to reframe failure so he doesn't experience that kind of suffering that I've experienced, the suffering a lot of entrepreneurs I know experience, because I fail, I suck, I can't get out of bed the next day, versus, oh, well, I expected this was not going to be perfect, and I'm going to try something better. I'm going to try something new. And keep going and keep going and keep going. Who knows what this kid's going to accomplish? Worst case scenario, he's just happy. What a great life.
That is such a good point. That is such a good point, because I've been thinking a lot about like expectations lately. And, you know, I struggle with this. Like, of course, I'm human, everybody. clearly. And, you know, I think about like failure a lot and expectations. And it's amazing to me, just anecdotally, like how much different my state is, my state of being, based upon the expectations that I set. Like,
sure,
if I wake up in a day, if I like wake up in the morning and I set the expectation of this is going to be an amazing day, then it usually is going to be an amazing day. And like, I'm living and putting myself in a state of like approaching, you know, like what we said when we first got on the call, you're like, how you doing? I was like, fantastic, and getting better every minute. Like, I meant that because that's like the expectation I'm setting for myself. But also, I also think that, and now there's like a very two different sides here, but I also think that expectations of progress over an extended period of time, that is so critical, because if you're here and your role model, the person that you're aspiring to be, is here, right? And then 3 months later, you're here. So you've gone from here to here. So you've made positive progress, but you're still not here where your role model is. Then, I realize that's confusing for people listening on the audio.
Well, give me a shot at this, because I think I know where you're going with this.
Yeah.
So a lot of people will say to me, people say, hey, I want to hire extraordinary advisors to teach my business to make the Inc. 5000 6 times. That's their expectation of working with me. And I have to reframe that. I said, well, you know, it's not, I said, that's really the wrong goal. That's really the wrong benchmark. Most companies I've ever worked with, my company included, you know, it's more of a hockey stick. It's got a very long base, and then there's a quick upturn. That's typically because the long part of the stick is where the learning is occurring, where the failure is occurring. And then it clicks, it goes, and boom, you have a rocket of success. And then what happens is you plateau. And then sometimes you take a step back, and then you got to learn, you got to train. I often say to my clients, you know, the team that got you to $1 million, or the team that got you to $5 million, may not be the team that gets you to $20 million in revenue. And here's the reasons why. And I go to through all that, because the reality is this. So if your goal is to have $1 million company, I think the first thing we would talk about is, I'd say, well, you do realize 5% of all businesses in the United States reach $1 million or more in revenue. I say that stat all the time. People are like, no way, really? I said, yeah. I think the better challenge is, how much money do you want to make? Not how much revenue do you want to have? And what's your formula for that? I had one client, I had that very exact conversation with him. We reframed his thought of what success looked like. And within 8 months, he took his margins from 5-6% to almost 40% on the same revenue. So his revenue didn't go up. He didn't get a step closer to $1 million. But boy, his Christmas was a whole lot better because he had a whole lot more money in his pocket. So it's that framework around what success looks like. That framework of, you know, I was here, I should be here. Well, let's take a step back and let's take a look at what your journey should be like. If you think it's going to be a straight line from point A to point B, and it's a straight line to success, I've never seen it work that way. It just so much of what I do is work with that intention versus expectation. But I often say to clients, well, you know, I expect by working with you that I'm going to get A, B, and C. Well, the reality is, I can give you all the ideas and I can give you all the coaching. You got to do the work. Now, if you do the work, you do what you commit to, and we constantly iterate and we constantly pivot, then working with me should give you a return of about 4 to 6 times of your investment. But you've got to do the work. and you've got to be honest with me. And you gotta put the time, effort, and energy into those things, and you got to keep your commitments. It's not success is not a point A to point B from 0 to 100 straight shot.
I totally agree. It's interesting. You came at it from like the business perspective, and where I was kind of coming at it from was more of like the personal journey, right? You know, if you're let's say you're at 1% right now, and you know in 3 months you're at 5%, but your role model is at 80%. The 1 to 5%, that's a good increase. Like you're making material positive movement, and that's great. But I feel like so many people get so frustrated and they quit because they expect to be at 80.
Oh, it's crazy. So if you take a look at the mindset, and I will spin it back into real life, but you take the mindset of an entrepreneur and how we act, all the crazy nonsense and the monkeys in our minds and the bright and shiny stuff and all the ways we do that. You take those behavior patterns, you lay those behavior patterns against someone who's got an alcohol or a drug dependency. They're very similar. And I say that a lot and it shocks people, but the addictive personality of an alcoholic is very similar to the addictive personality of an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And there's find it. The reality is, if you talk to somebody in a 12-step program, what do they say? 1 day at a time, 1 hour at a time, sometimes 1 minute at a time, for them to get to a place of feeling successful. Same thing with entrepreneurs. If you think about it like this, and I always say this to my clients who want immediate, I love the entrepreneur because I was this guy. Let's see, I just want it now. Yesterday would have been better. Tomorrow's too late, so now is good. So can I just have it now? That doesn't work that way. It doesn't work the way as a parent. It doesn't work the way as an entrepreneur. It doesn't work the way as a human being. But I speak from experience. Someone was really helpful in me in reframing. What if you just changed 1% per week? Within 52 weeks, you're going to be 50% better. You can literally grow your business out of business if you grow too fast. And having been on the Inc. list and having the privilege and the opportunity to speak with the editors of the magazine, I say, what happened to the people who made the list, so many times? It goes, oh, most of them were bought. Most of them were acquired. They ran out of money, but they were growing, but they grew out of business. So really, I always argue a successful entity is growing over a 365-day window. Anywhere from 10 to 20% is healthy, sustainable growth. Well, why wouldn't you say the same thing about your business or your life? Unless a student really has a breakthrough and there's just a learning piece that's missed, to go from being a C student to being an A+ student overnight is, unless you weren't studying before, I don't know any kid who's really going to be able to do that. But if you're seeing incremental growth, and if a parent encourages incremental growth, that's huge. There's such value in incremental growth. It's like compounding interest in the banks. Everybody, I don't know, I guess maybe you could tell me. People have this whole investment strategy of, I'm just going to go to the grocery store, to the gas station, and scratch off lottery tickets, and I'm just going to become a lottery winner. Of bankrupt millionaires are lottery winners. It's not a sustainable model. It doesn't work. Yet we live our lives that way of just bigger, faster, more now, preferably yesterday.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I love what you said about the compounding, because if you get 1% better every week, it's like that grows on itself.
Oh, totally.
And you're not only like, you're compounding the growth, you're compounding like the improvement, but you're also compounding the momentum.
Well, it is that. Jim Collins talks about this in Good to Great, probably one of my top 5 favorite business books of all time. And it's that flywheel effect. And you do that first revolution of the flywheel and the second revolution of the flywheel. And eventually, like compounding interest and compounding momentum, it starts to spin on its own. Same thing in every business that I've seen really grow and scale has to get that flywheel effect going. The entrepreneur or the business owner doesn't even understand what they're doing to get that momentum going, but the team sees it. But think about it like, I've done triathlons. First triathlon, I didn't know how to swim. I mean, again, that's a story for a podcast for another day. But the reality is, if you're going to train for a triathlon, you have to do a little bit 5 to 7 days a week sometimes. You can't train for a triathlon by doing a triathlon every day. The human body doesn't work that way. We will break down. Even the best athletes I know train a little bit every day. They train different things every day. They don't do the same thing every day. Same things apply to whether you're a student, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're a parent. Doing a little bit every single day. You can love your kid every single day, give them encouragement every single day. Maybe tweak it, maybe adjust it, maybe move it. I heard this great thing the other day, and I share it now with all my audiences. You can tell your kid how proud of them. There's nothing wrong with that. But there's so much more power in saying, shouldn't you, Ben, be proud of yourself for your accomplishment? That teaches them to have that external or that internal reward, not waiting for external validation. I was blown away. Small tweak. One thing we changed this week is how we talk. Those little things done over time, polished and enhanced. That's where the magic occurs. It's not going to happen overnight.
I love that. I really do. I really, really do. And I think it's an extraordinarily powerful lesson that, if actually implemented, could make a dramatic impact in your life over a very extended period of time. So I think that's great.
And I heard it from a 19-year-old kid who heard it from another person. I had a speaker at an event I was attending, 19-year-old young man. Connor's up there talking to us as parents, talking to us. It's like, you have no idea what you mean. I really don't. It's been a long time since most of us were 19. And he's telling the story about, specifically, I think it was tied to Instagram, and how a young lady he knew took 45 minutes to get out the door for an evening out with her friends because she couldn't get the Instagram selfie taken. And she couldn't get in the mirror. All these different things. He's telling the story, and it's just painful to hear. Because if you're a parent of a daughter, or you're a young man who's in love with a young lady, like, you want that person to just feel good about themselves without having to receive 75 likes in 15 minutes, or the photo was terrible, and all these different external things. I'm like, how incredibly sad. And if her parents would have just said to her, listen, we're very proud of you, but why don't you be proud of yourself? And you did great on this, you did great on this. Be proud of yourself. Nice job. Be proud of yourself. Maybe she wouldn't need 45 minutes and 10 selfies to be able to post on social media for her to go out and have a nice evening with her friends.
That's a great point. And I think social media has amplified those types of need, or that type of need for external validation. But I don't think it created it. I think it amplified what was already there. But I think that underlying, insecurity, if you will, was always there. Always there.
I think insecurity is a universal theme sometimes. And I think, again, if you take the amplification approach to it, if we're always insecure, then if you shine a light on it, it just brings the insecurities to the surface. It's no different than fame or money or anything else. If you have those things going on and someone shines a light on it, or throws cash at it, or throws adulation at it, it just brings up the worst. Either brings up the best in people or the worst in people.
Yeah. And back to what you were saying about the investment strategy of the lottery tickets. So many times you hear about the people who win $300 million and then they go broke in a couple of years, because they're still the same person after they won that money. In fact, they're probably going to, it's going to amplify what they're already doing. So if they have poor financial management, decision-making capabilities beforehand, then when you add way more money to that, it's just going to accelerate that process.
Oh, it definitely, in that case, it's definitely more money, more problems.
Yeah, definitely. So let's talk about that time in your life when you got to, I believe you said $600,000 in debt.
Yeah. So it was an interesting time because our business, like I said, had grown really fast, really rapidly. And as the entrepreneur, as the leader, what that did is it gave me a false sense of knowledge. Because if I'm successful, if the business is successful, then I must be successful. If the business is smart, I must be smart. Well, the reality was it was catching the right wave at the right time and not getting the right support around the business or around the entrepreneur, in my case, to really see that through. And we didn't realize it at the time in 05, 06 that the recession, the big recession was already looming. We just hadn't seen all the indicators yet. And we had a couple of clients that went bankrupt on us to the tune of $350,000. That didn't help. And our expectation was that we were going to compete against the big companies, the Kelly Services, the Manpowers, who had deep pockets and deep infrastructure. We were going to compete against them, and we were going to be, David to their Goliath. Well, that terrible business strategy, not a good plan. Did not work, obviously. And so we had that come up. We had a couple other hiccups along the way, and I wasn't understanding the right data instrumentation to watch. I always think of if I'm flying a plane and I just happen to get in the cockpit and it happened to work, great. I have no idea what the altimeter means. Now I need to understand what all these dials mean. The plane's going down. Not such a good place to be in. And what it caused me to do is it caused me to go with what I'd learned as a young person, self-reliance. I read a lot of books on it, and I researched it, and I couldn't figure it out. It wasn't making any sense. And then the negative talk in my head got louder and more amplified, and we got companies going out of business, sticking us with the debt, the banks on hand. It was just bad. So what do most people do when anything gets too loud? We go into shutdown mode, and that's what I did. Just about when I'm ready to give up, I get the kind of like the Rocky movies for people who have watched those. Like, all right, I got to give this one more try. I just got to give this a shot. And I realized that being a lifelong learner should serve me well. So I started reading different books about other being successful. I was focused on literature at the time that was going to help me deal with the result. When I started reading books about how did I get into the problem I got into? What's the cause of my problem? It's like, well, I have the sniffles. I should just deal with that. Well, no, I have like a sinus infection. I should probably take a different medication. So I pivoted my thought process on that, and I reached out for help, and I hired a coach, and a coach I couldn't afford, coach I couldn't pay. And I told him all this. I was like beyond transparent and upfront because I've been living in the shadows for so long and I couldn't deal with the problem. It's kind of like, it was like going to confession. It's like, I have I did the I statement. I have really screwed this up 6 ways from Sunday, and I don't know if it's salvageable. During that thought process, he says, well, I need to get paid. I said, I have a credit card. Can you take a credit card? I'll pay on the credit card. I'll pay you up front. I got to get this one more shot. And he took a look at the numbers. He's like, you're $600,000 in debt. What are you, an idiot? Why do you just discharge us in bankruptcy? So I'm pondering that thought process. And I go home and I have dinner with my son that night. It's just him and I. And he was stressing. He was nervous. And I'm trying to provide him with reassurance, which I was not very good at. Because I'm like, the reality is this is a pretty big chunk of money. I said to him, and I said, well, it's been suggested I just file for bankruptcy. And let me tell you why I can't do that. I can't do that because I've always told you that you have to be a man of your word. And I've always told you that you honor your commitments. And just because a company didn't honor its financial commitments to me and went bankrupt on us and stuck us with this debt, two wrongs don't make a right. I've promised the bank the money. I've promised our vendors these monies. We should honor that. I should do everything I can, which means we may not have Christmas for a couple of years, which means this, which means that. So I painted this really bleak picture for him. He's, he's a little kid. He's like, okay, Dad, I get it, but didn't like it. Fast forward to about 4 years ago, we're hiking in the mountains of Peru. He just graduated from college. And he brings up that conversation that I'd completely forgotten about. He's like, that really impacted me. I'm like, well, tell me how. He's like, because every time I think of taking the easy way out on something, I think about how you stuck it out. And I'm like, thank you so much for sharing that with me. I thought you didn't hear me. It was one of those really big pivotal moments as a parent, but also it goes to the core values of me as the owner, but also the core values of our family. So it really encompassed a lot of things that I work with my clients on and helping them figure out what their core values are. What do they believe in? There's nothing worse than the company you walk into saying, we believe in honesty and integrity, yet they're not paying their bills. The CEO believes in honesty and integrity, and he doesn't want his wife to meet his girlfriend. I mean, it's just messed up crap you run into in the coaching space. And I'm like, no, this is not how we do business. This is not how I want to live my life. So the fact that, my now 20-something-year-old son is be able to recall that and pull that story out of his memory and how it resonated with him, it made all the suffering worthwhile. And so now when I tell the story, it's like I tell that part and I say, and we paid, people say, well, wasn't your greatest moment being on the Inc. 5000 6 times? So that was really cool. It was a great accomplishment for the company. I didn't do it by myself. My greatest moment as an entrepreneur was knowing we satisfied every single dollar of all $600,000 in debt. That makes me feel the most accomplished. So to get back to zero was my biggest accomplishment.
That moment with your son, though, that to me seems like the biggest win.
Oh, for sure.
That you were able to demonstrate what you truly believed and communicate that to him, and that stuck with him. And then y'all got to talk about it, and he talked about how much that impacted him. That is that to me is moving. That to me
thank you.
Truly inspirational.
Well, and it's so appreciative. Being a single parent is not an easy job. I always admire, because you hear so much about the single moms. I always admire the single moms who are able to get their kids from point A to point B and maintain employment and impact their community. It's so powerful. And it's so exciting for me to know that I've ingrained my son, my mom was a single mom, imparted into me now, and now he's got those. And it's a great family legacy for us to know that when we make a statement, when we say we're going to do something, we honor our commitments. We stand by what we're going to do. And in a world today where bankruptcy is easy and other things are a nod and a wink, to know that that's how we live our lives, that we can now carry that sense of honesty and integrity. It's so rewarding as a father. So yeah, but I appreciate you recognizing that.
Absolutely. I like I said before, I feel very grateful for my family, and I feel like I'm very lucky to have the sort of relationship with my father that I do. And there have been a couple times where we've had conversations similar to, of course, not the same by any means. I'm not trying to compare and by any means, but just conversations that we've had that have just been very impactful. And I've talked to him about that. And I still don't think he fully grasps how much it really did impact me and how much it really meant to me. But I hope he does. Now.
Well, I think so much of it is, as a parent, is, we're living in the moment. We're trying to serve a lot of different people. We're trying to serve our kids, our careers. We're trying, I always tell my entrepreneurs, you got to take care of yourself too. If a lot of people draw from your well and your reserves, you've got to take care of yourself, whether it's through exercise, through meditation, through lifelong learning, whatever you need. If you're empty, then everybody else is going to get the bottom of the barrel, the sludge at the bottom. And so one of the best ways that it resonates most with me, and it sounds like you're trying to practice other, is to express and receive gratitude. Mm-hmm. And it's so difficult, especially I think for men, to receive gratitude from our families. We're taught to be the providers. We're taught to be the patriarchs and the caregivers on such a level, and to carry some certain bigger burdens than we're often equipped to handle. So the fact that you're able to even express that, chances are he heard you, but you know what? There's nothing wrong with telling him again.
Yeah, you're right. I really do make a point to try to tell them, like both of my parents, I try to tell them like at least once a week how grateful I am for them, because they deserve it. Like they're awesome. And I am so grateful for them. So
well, that's awesome to hear. That's awesome. If your audience takes nothing out of today's conversation, take that.
Well, Todd, I want to thank you for coming on the show today. I really do appreciate it. And feel like we covered a lot of things that some of it, can be difficult to talk about. And, I appreciate you being willing to go there with me, because I think it's important to talk about it. And I think it's very valuable for people. So,
Well, thank you for creating that safe space so I could be authentic and transparent and vulnerable with you and your audience, because that's really going back to the failing and the challenges in life and the successes in life. A lot of people can posture, and a lot of people can position themselves in a multitude of different ways. But I think at the end of the day, when you can have a heartfelt conversation with another human being, and you can be authentic and transparent and vulnerable with another human being, people feel that. And for the people who may be listening who feel like nobody understands me, or they feel alone, and they like, oh, that resonated with me, or that, wow, I've been in that way, or I've been a single parent, I know how tough it is. The guy who comes on and says, just here's my 5-step plan, and just buy that, and for $19.95 you can have it all work out perfectly. An authentic, transparent, and vulnerable conversation like we've had today is so enriching for me as a guest. So I thank you as your guest, for you as the host, making it such a comfortable space.
Well, thank you very much for that. I have 2 more questions for you. Then we'll wrap it on up.
Sounds good.
Is there anything about yourself that you think is an important part of who you are that I did not ask you about today? In other words, what did I miss?
Oh, interesting question. I think you've done a really good job of weaving in all the parts of who I am now as an entrepreneur, as a business leader, as a business coach, as a speaker, as a parent. I think the one thing that I really with the audience is how important I find it is now at the stage of my life to redefine success without a monetary component. So for me, success real simply is doing what I want, when I want, with whom I want to go do it with, as often as I want to go do it. And I stole that from Tony Robbins. Thank you, Tony, for that wonderful gift. But that allows me to make a lot of different choices in a lot of different decisions that have nothing to do with cash. I was very fortunate about 10 years ago to work with a guy named Simon Sinek, The Power of Why. And he helped me figure out why I get out of bed every day. So now I have purpose and passion. It's 2 words: improve lives. So those are that's how I enjoy my life, but that's also how I make all of my decisions. So we talked yesterday, and we rescheduled our interview for today because you said to me it would be the opportunity for me to have a different conversation. Perfect. I want to improve lives in everything that I do. I want to be able to live a life of success in doing what I want with whom I want to do it with. Those are the driving factors of how I think a life by design is well lived for me. And so I think that's the one thing that we really didn't flesh out.
Awesome. Last question for you. What question should I be asking you that I just wouldn't think to ask?
I think that the biggest question that I find that I like asking the most lately, and I've had it for less than 2 months. I ask 2 questions of everybody I meet when they're open, and not everybody's open to having a real conversation. But I always ask people. I had lunch with a great friend of mine yesterday, and I asked him, the opening question wasn't, "Hi, how are you? How are you doing?" I said, "What's the biggest thing in your life that you're working on?" And he answered that question with a question. Because, do you mean in business or personally? I said, yes. Answer it any way you want. And so we had an incredibly organic conversation. And he's like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't even plan on talking to you about that." So I love that. So what's the biggest thing in your life that you're working on? And then the other question I ask them is, what's the biggest rock in your shoe? Well, for business or personal? Yes. Either one of those questions, I think, are so powerful for people because we are such in a programmed society of, how are you? I'm great. How are you? I'm wonderful. Well, if we're all great and wonderful, then psychologists and psychopharmaceuticals there'd be no need for them. So so how do we create that environment, create that safe space so people can have a great conversation like we've had today? Those are the questions I would ask.
Well, do you feel like answering them?
So what is the big thing I'm working on right now? So the big thing I'm working on right now is I'm working on my second book, which ties into my coaching and speaking business. And it's all about entrepreneurship. And the biggest thing I'm trying to get succinctly down in 30 seconds or less is what is my unique ability? What is my superpower that my clients love? And I'm just asking my clients, why do you work with me? What do you get value out of it? And one guy said to me, he was like, the thing I love about you and the thing I hate about you the most is the same thing. He goes, you make me incredibly uncomfortable with all your questions and you don't let me off the mat until I answer them. He goes, so I love that and I hate that about you. I said, awesome, great. I'm good with that. So that's the big thing is I'm working on right now is how do I go out and help more people? I love the light bulb moments. I love it when people get something and they're able to make that 1% pivot 52 weeks a year so they live a better life. That is such a great legacy. It really is about the legacy. So I love that. So that's what I'm working on. I think the biggest rock in my shoe is the same thing. It's pretty much always how do I create a life by design of purpose and intentionality so that I'm able to impact as many people as I can while I'm here, because time is our only non-renewable resource. And I say this to people and they get crazy about it, but you can always make more money, but you can't make more time. So that's my biggest, I want to maximize the time I have with the people that I love and the clients that I care about. And how do I do before I run out of time? That's my, I always feel like the clock is always ticking, which brings us full circle back to losing your father at 5 years old. It really does reframe what life and death look like, because no one lasts forever. Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs either haven't lasted forever, no matter how much money they had. So we're here. I want to be here for a good time, because a long time.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, Todd, for coming on the show today, sharing everything that you have, and sharing this time with me. It's been very, very special. So thank you.
I've absolutely enjoyed the conversation. In fact, I've enjoyed the conversation so much. I'd like to make an offer to anybody who's listening to this broadcast. Hit me up at extraordinaryadvisors.com. Go to the contact me page. Tell me one thing you liked about our conversation today, and I'm happy to give you 30 minutes of my time for free to talk about anything you want to talk about: business, personal, expectations versus intentions, DNA over resume, anything you want, just because I've had such a great time being on the program today. I want to give that back to your audience.
Awesome. And everybody who's watching, listening, I want to thank y'all very, very much. I can say that I know that your time is very grateful. I mean, your time is very, very valuable, and I'm very grateful that you would choose to share that with us today. So thank you very much. That's all, folks. I'll see you on the next episode. Thank you very much.